Welcome to The World Today. I'm Vikas Majid Khan. Today we have an interesting topic to talk about in our show, and that is the portrayal of Pakistan-US relations within the media. Unfortunately, recently there have been a lot of stories which have been negative, or it could also be taken as negative propaganda. Some people are accusing it of being propaganda, but the fact remains that Pakistan and the United States are witnessing a downward trajectory of their relationship. We also know of the incident where the Air and Defense Attaché, Mr. Hall, ran over a Pakistani citizen. We're going to talk about that. And we'll also talk about the fact that there have been conflicting news items in the press, whether diplomats in Pakistan, US diplomats in Pakistan and Pakistani diplomats in the US have been given some travel restrictions. Now, these stories have been denied by both the Pakistani and US governments. We'll talk about that in detail. So let's begin the program, and let me introduce my guests in the studio joining me today for this discussion. First of all, we have Yasser Masood with us, and with him we have Mohammed Shiraz. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here. Let's begin, sir. First of all, Yasser, I want to ask you, we've also had a number of shows talking about the Pakistan-US relationship. Do you think that there is an excessive negative propaganda when it comes to discussing Pakistan-US relations, or do you think that that is not the case?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, Waqas, yes, like we have been conducting lots of shows on Pakistan-US relations, and there is a very, there is rationality behind it. There is a reason behind it, because since last year, we have been facing some downward trajectory between the relations. But first of all, yes, I agree that there is a bit too much negative portrayal when it comes to US-Pakistan relations. Like a petty incident may be highlighted in the media as that is something really big. But at the end of the matter, when we go deeper into it, it's not that big. I mean, it's not that harsh when the way it is being portrayed. But as I mentioned that, yes, there is some kind of rationality, because let's start that why it is happening. We need to realize that, especially from the time when the Trump administration came into power, and especially from the dawn of this year, on the 1st of January, when the tweet came from Trump. Only then, since then we have some strained relations.
So you think that there's been a reaction to the tweet as well?
There has been reaction to the tweet. Then last year, the first FPAC policy, where Pakistan was accused of harboring terrorists, or Pakistan have safe havens, then the tweet, and then inclusion of Pakistan into the grey list. I mean, all those news. So there is a continuity of some kind of messages and some kind of stances from the US administration. So obviously Pakistan has to react, and Pakistan responded in a very sane manner. Pakistan has responded in a very sagacious manner, I would say, because considering our foreign policy stances. But the problem is, if we keep on going on this trajectory, this would not be in the benefit of the US or either Pakistan. Because right now, if, for the sake of the argument, if US wants Pakistan as a scapegoat, which is our stance, that US is making Pakistan scapegoat because of what is happening in Afghanistan, so that is not going to help. US has to realize that, look, what Pakistan has, they have to acknowledge our sacrifices against the war on terror. So instead of appreciating, instead of, giving a boost to Pakistan's sacrifices and giving this acknowledgement, we see that the things are happening the other way around. It seems like they are overly pressurizing Pakistan. They are not coming up with any tangible solutions.
Right. So, okay, let's get Mohammed Shiraz's opinion on this matter as well. Do you agree with what Yasser Saab is saying, or do you have a different point of view?
According to the first thing which we mentioned about the propaganda and making an issue out of this accident, I would say, whatever the reason was, some certain traffic rules and regulations were not followed, and eventually that's what happened over there on the road. So it should not be colored as something which has to do with the relationship, bilateral relationship. Such incidents may occur on both sides. Some Pakistani diplomat may have been involved in some road accident. So I think so should not be taken as an opportunity or as a point where they can, you can say, used undiplomatic gestures against each other. One first thing. Secondly, the important part is Pakistan and US has been having a roller coaster kind of a relationship. That's what we have seen on and on off kind of a scenario. So in that regard, fine, fair enough, there are issues which need to be resolved, but when the continuity of the strong language which we have seen being used from the US side, Pakistan has to respond, but not necessarily the way Pakistan has tried to respond. I would say, yes, Pakistan should convey their message in a way which does not offend the other party as well. Because United States of America, yes, we have a long-standing relationship with them, but also they are the superpower of the world as well. So that is going to be very important. They have their concerns regarding Pakistan's war on terror and their war on terror. So there are two different wars which are taking place in this region. One which Pakistan is fighting for its own sake, and the other one is the US war on terror. So there are two different things going on. They have blamed us for, the war on terror, which you claim to be your war on terror, is for your interest. But what about our interests, such as the Haqqani group, such as the Afghan Taliban, and so on and so forth? So then again, so many times this issue have come up. And the one thing which we have been emphasizing on over the period of time, that we need to define certain terms. What are those interests? Why are we in clash with those interests? What can be the middle way where both the parties can set, okay, fine, fair enough. That's where we need to work on, and that is the creative way of doing things, rather than standing on our position and blaming each other for the faults or the issues or the challenges, I would say, which both the countries face in the region. So that is not the way forward. I think both the countries need to come to the table and negotiate a workable, logical outcome and agreement, because in this way what we have seen that after January 1st and onwards, it was, as you mentioned, 7 companies were also banned, Pakistani companies were banned. Then again, there were certain similar kind of news emerging from United States of America, that permanently, not giving aid to Pakistan, then putting certain government officials on the visa, not giving them visa. So these are the kind of visa issues. These visa issues should not be something which are the kind of accident which was there in Islamabad. It's sad that there was a loss of life involved in it, but I think it should not be interpreted or colored in a way where if you are trying to score something, I would say. So that should not be the case. On the other side, I think United States of America should also have a more diplomatic pressure on Pakistan than behaving like the way what we have seen in Syria. The Turkish statement in that regard is very near to reality, the way Russia and US are behaving in Syria, the kind of statements which we have seen in the past couple of days, the way they are. It's not a diplomatic or a state interaction, how states communicate with each other. So I think that needs to be work on the United States side, and on the other hand, we also need to see what is possible and where there are certain loopholes, because it is not that we are perfect in all the cases involved over here when it comes to US interests in the region, or for that matter the war on terror itself.
Right.
Yes, work needs to be done, but it should be done in a more diplomatic, in a working environment, rather than in creating a hostile structure and then trying to solve solutions, come up with solutions. I don't think that is the way forward.
All right, there's another aspect to a lot of the information that is disseminated to the public. We have a phenomenon now which is quite famous, and Mr. Donald Trump has made it quite famous, and that is the phenomenon of fake news. And when we hear about that, we also see that stories are reported in the press, such as the one where we have the United States and Pakistan are engaged in a diplomatic dispute. Now, this particular news item was denied by both sides. So why is it that we have such unsubstantiated news items? How are they allowed to appear in the press, despite the fact that both sides claim that these statements or stories are not true? Excuse me.
Yes, I mean, even if we talk about this sad incident, and we come to know that there are conflicting views, there are divergent views, as well as there are conflicting and completely opposite views about whether there could be restrictions on diplomatic ties. I mean, there is some news that Pakistani diplomats would not be allowed to go far behind 50 kilometers or miles radius in the US. But then at the same time, there is completely negation of these news. So I mean, it should not be this way, because it creates further chaos between between relations, and then it creates further gap.
No, but a story such as this one, which has been refuted by both the Pakistani and American government, how does a story like this come into being in the first place? So do you think that there are other third parties which are playing with the relationship which is between two countries? A third player comes in, or a fourth or a fifth, and they start spreading misinformation regarding the relationship of those two countries, falls into the sort of a propaganda machine system.
It cannot be said in black and white whether third party is involved or not, but at this, it can be assumed that if these news are being allowed to the press, I mean, it's a very sad thing, because there are already misconceptions and misperceptions between the relations of US and Pakistan. So if it is happening, so it means there are third parties. They do not want to have a very smooth relations between both countries. But if it is happening, it is the responsibility of both governments, from the Pakistani side as well as from the US side, that not to allow such news, because such rumors may create further gap between relations, as I just said. And there are already, we have strained relations over what is happening in Afghanistan. We have different stances, as my colleague just mentioned, that there are two kinds of wars are happening in this region. We have some our own options, we have our own reservations, we have our own sacrifices, and US has their own reservations. So considering all these facts, both countries, they need to sit together, and they need to clarify certain things. They need to talk about those stumble blocks, that where are the hiccups. And until and unless they are not clarified, there should be a clear vision on both sides, and what is the tangible way out, what is the tangible outcome for both countries. Only then we can have a smooth relationships. I mean, if it is happening over and over again, it creates further gap between both countries. So I mean, if it is happening as you just mentioned, there has to be a proper check. There has to be a proper check and balance, that if we presume that there are third parties who are giving further air and fuel to, they are interested that both countries' relation should go on the worst side. So there has to be some mechanism which must be devised, so that in the future it should not occur.
What are your views on fake news?
Well, in Pakistan, the public opinion has never been in favor of United States of America. I would say that will have a little impact of, small impact on what the kind of relationship both the countries share. Yes, but I think the brinkmanship should be avoided at the governmental level. That's what we are seeing, the kind of threatening language being used by both the sides, I would say. One action and the other reaction, that is another way of looking at it, obviously. But I think there should be a wise way of going through this difficult time. As I've mentioned multiple times, it's a very difficult time and challenging times for Pakistan. So the diplomats should be out there. We should be, making sure that no minute is being, you can say, wasted in that regard, and that we need to go through this difficult time without, having any kind of significant damage done to the relationship as well. So I think both the countries are important for each other, and they need to understand that, and this kind of brinkmanship should be avoided. As far as the news is concerned, this news may not have impact on the public opinion, or may further add to the kind of public opinion which we have towards the United States of America, but it definitely indicates the kind of hostilities, or the kind of, if I may use the right word, clash of interest between both the governments. And that is where the brinkmanship comes in. So they are trying to safeguard their interests or get the job done by using threatening language, which is, I don't think so, has been as successful against Pakistan. Pakistan has been more upfront when it comes to, talking to Pakistan in simple terms.
So do you think that in today's day and age, we have diplomatic norms being thrown out of the window when countries are now addressing each other. You also mentioned Russia and United States entering into a war of words. We just recently saw Britain and Russia also in a similar situation. So having said that, how important is it to focus on diplomacy rather than allowing yourself to be influenced by stories appearing in the press, because they do have an influence, especially for those normal citizens, ordinary citizens do get their information from the newspapers.
Well, I think yes, they have an impact. That's what I said. There is an impact. But in this context, this story points a direct more towards the kind of tactics used by both the governments in order to safeguard their interests. But that is not, that should be avoided. That's the point. Because United States of America and Pakistan need each other. Maybe Pakistan needs more United States of America. We have to make sure we should not decide or based on national intentions, I would say. We should decide based on national interests. So that is where we have been confusing our policy as far as our relationship with other countries are concerned, especially United States of America. So we need to work on that.
No, but a story such as this one, how can it emerge when clearly we have this US State Department denying it and saying that they can confirm that there are no restrictions on travel for Pakistani diplomats in the United States. But conversely, when we do talk about the American diplomats living in Pakistan, they do have some issues in their traveling because
there are certain issues.
They have issues because of security concerns,
Yes,
which
security
are not.
and visas as well. In the same story that has been, because this visa battle has been going on since long.
So when you take things out of context and you try to juxtapose them together, then you always create a situation which is doubtful. That is what we are witnessing in our press, and which is the reason why we are actually talking about it.
That is one way of looking at it, obviously. But on the, if you look, have a general view of the relationship between the two, I think in the past couple of years it has been at the lowest ebb for that matter. So it is not out of context what is being there on the newspaper as well. As I mentioned, similar kind of news was also emerging from United States of America previously, because they have temporarily suspended the aid to Pakistan, the military aid to Pakistan. And now after that they were thinking about, so it's not about it is being implemented, but no comment has been given on that. The White House did not clearly deny that no such thing is under discussion. They just said that so far there is no such restrictions whatsoever. So we cannot speculate about what will happen in the future.
And yet, this is what we do. We do keep on speculating about what is going to happen, and we also try to color things, favoring them in the way we want. That's what the media does. That's what we're talking about over here, Yasir.
Yes.
In your opinion, do you think that the role of the media is suspect when it starts coloring information or it starts pushing an agenda? So that becomes a problem. Do you agree with that or not?
Yes, I certainly agree, and there is a point to what my colleague said. I mean, this tug of war which started between Pakistan or US or any other country for that matter, whether it comes to in the print media or the electronic media. And you see, in this day and age, it's the electronic media, this medium, it runs through the whole world just in a flash, in a minute. So the news are being, it's spreaded all over the world. But we are more concerned about its influence. Like, for example, as I just mentioned, that it may not lead to any kind of strained relations, or we should not base these incidents to have, at the detriment of our relations. Agreed that we had roller coaster moments with each other, agreed that we had transactional relations, agreed that we have need-based relations, considering the fact, if I confine it to Pakistan-US relations. But I absolutely agree with your viewpoint that, petty matters, if it comes on the electronic media or in the print media. But the problem is, this is popular in the whole world now, Trumpian tweets. And it started particularly from there. So instead of using those diplomatic ties, those diplomatic means, the dialogue, the proper mechanism, which is for the countries to have a negotiation, to have a table talk, so that they can resolve the issues.
So
if they are creating, an ambience of, harsh tug of wars or in a reactionary mode, definitely Pakistan has to respond as well. But my point is that that is not in the benefit of any country, whether be it US, Pakistan or any other diplomatic ties. Instead, we should be rather more confined and restricted to the diplomatic means and norms where we can talk about certain issues. But I won't say that it is such a big issue or it is just a petty matter which can occur anywhere in the world. So, but we have to look for the positives. We have very long-standing relationships with US. And if we want to resolve issues amongst ourselves, whether be it in Afghanistan or any other particular issue in this region, so we have to come out of that phase now. We have to look for for workable solutions with each other. If we carry on with this, going on this blind alley, the blind alley is that if there is a kind of stance which emanates from the US government and we respond, and then there is another stance from there, so there would not be any end to it. So my point is that
we just witnessed that recently in the case of the over 60 Russian diplomats being expelled from the US and similar action being taken by the Russians. So
yes,
that has basically plunged the relationship between the US and Russia to the lowest depths at the moment.
Yes.
And Mr. Trump has also voiced his opinion on that things have never been as worse between Russia and the US as they are now. So coming back to the point, how much of a role has the press, the international press, played in ruining relationships between countries? Let's put it like that.
Well, international, that's a very interesting and a difficult question. What kind of role?
Very tricky question. Yes.
Sorry
What
about
kind
that.
of role press can play in making or breaking the relationship, for that matter? I think that is going to be then again a kind of a very open question, because of the fact press can play a very important role in
yes,
democratic countries, for that matter. That the public opinion, the making of public opinion. So press can obviously play a very important role when it comes to there's an election year in the offing, okay? And then again, the kind of propaganda which is being made through the media, and the public is buying that propaganda. The Iraq war is another example. What happened over there was based on the propaganda within the press, within the media, for that matter. So in that regard, I would say it is a make or break situation, because the public opinion in United States of America has been, over the period of time, the kind of news which are emerging from Pakistan has been having a negative impact on their image towards Pakistan. So I think, yes, in that way, in the indirect manner, yes, they have very grave and serious implications for the bilateral relationships, for that matter. So that's why it's important. That's why we always come up with the responsibility, the ethics of media, the ethics of reporting, for that matter. The report should be there, but it should be kept in mind that it should not hurt the national interest of the host country, or for that matter, relations with any other country. For instance, if something very negative is being played on in the United States of America, for that matter, the recent incident of what you call where 7 Pakistani companies were banned, for that matter, and then Pakistan was blamed for terror financing, put on that grey list. I think that has an implication. When it appears in the newspaper in the United States of America, the public opinion directly points out towards the fact, okay, fine, we are doing everything over there, but our partners are not equally helpful. That's why we are not having the results which we are supposed to have in the 17 years of a 17-year-long war. So yes, there are implications between the states and within the state as well. So I think the role of media in this globalized world is equally very significant. So that's why it's important that such news should not be portrayed or set forward in a way, or framed in a way which hurts the relationship, because we need to, as I mentioned, we need to be less emotional. We need to follow the national interest rather than national intentions. We have to have this relationship, and it is equally important for United States of America, because this kind of foreign policy which is being run on Twitter, I think that's a very grave concern for even for the United States of America itself, that Mr. President Trump, Donald J. Trump, comes on Twitter, tweets something, and then whole of the US infrastructure, the political infrastructure, state infrastructure has to come in defense of that
Or damage control.
damage control and
needs to be done.
and then implementation on the other end as well, you know,
Right.
so that one section may be damage controlling, other is preparing ground in order to how to execute this tweet now. So that is becoming very dangerous in a way that those serious matters should not be discussed on social media. It is good for public publicity. Fine,
Again, when
fair
we
enough.
talk about the way facts are disseminated in the media, whether we're talking about international media or any media, recently we saw how the Israeli forces fired upon the protesting Palestinians. But the way the story was put together, the words that were used to cover that story were trying to negate the fact or trying to water down the act that had actually, the act of killing innocent protesters was watered down in the way that news was presented. So again, we have agendas that are being pushed.
There are
so,
agendas
So
and-
how do we reconcile the fact that the media is supposed to be the upholder of the truth and to bring the facts to the audience? Then
that has become a bit funny now, and the upholder of the truth is
but that is
something-
their job.
It is their job, but I don't think so. That's what's happening right now.
So how can that be rectified?
That is, then again, it's the one thing, the internal structure, as we have been talking about, we have been listening about ethics of media in Pakistan. There are certain rules and regulations. There should be certain rules and regulations. There should be awareness of what is our national interest and how should we defend it, especially on national security issues, because it's sad to know that a non-security issue, a national security issue becomes a national security issue, and a national security issue totally, goes unattended. So this needs to be addressed on the one end, I would say. As far as on the other side, if we see the developed countries, such as United States of America, they very much use media as a foreign policy tool for their national interest. So I think if we correct ourselves using media in our favor in that regard, I think that will somehow, you can say, reduce the impact of the fake news, because both the countries will be able to come to the conclusion that this kind of news will further take us apart from each other, which is not in our interest. As I mentioned earlier, we should not play the game of brinkmanship. Pakistan, as we mentioned about Palestinian issue, Pakistan is not Palestine. Pakistan is a nuclear state. For that matter, I think it's important and the strategic location of Pakistan and the geopolitics, which is now shifting and evolving politics as well. So I think United States of America needs to understand, and they, I think, understand the fact. And we need to collaborate more with the United States of America on grounds such as energy, such as education, such as technology. So these are the grounds which we need to further our collaboration with them by negotiating this what you can say misunderstanding. And misunderstanding can take place anywhere. So I think a misunderstanding will remain misunderstanding unless you sincerely address them. If you don't want to address them sincerely, if one party thinks they can get it all without involving the other party, that's where the positions are, and that's where the fault is. So we should look towards the interest. So interest of both the countries is to further remove this misunderstanding and strengthen their relationship. So that's what I see. I think I have been emphasizing on the fact that because Pakistan is a country which can become a bridge under the current situation. Obviously, it's difficult to say, but Pakistan has been a bridge between the East and the West during the Cold War. China and United States of America, for that matter, Reagan.
Absolutely.
So Pakistan can play the same role in this century as well. So we have to, very eloquently get over these difficult times and come to a common ground while negotiating with United States of America how to define, how to defend, how to find a way where both our interests are served. The interest is to have a stable Afghanistan. The interest is to get rid of terrorism. So these should be our prominent goals, and that collaboration should now shift more towards non-security issues, because terrorism cannot only be dealt through security issues. So fine, fair enough, security assistance and help should be there, but I think more emphasis should also be given on the non-security issues, where I think there's more ground to play, and where there are more opportunity of friendship.
Well, Yasser, coming back to the point of the unfortunate accident of the US diplomat, that story was connected, or there was some color trying to be given in certain sections of the media that there was a connection between this accident and then the actions that were supposedly taken by the US and Pakistani governments, that is restricting their diplomats within 50-mile radius and so on and so forth, and that such conditions already existed in Pakistan for US diplomats, and now they're just repaying us in the same coin. Now, connecting these two stories together to create a controversy where none actually exists. What do you think about that?
Waqas, I will come back to your previous question because it is very much akin and it is very much related to that. I will talk about this incident, but considering the fact why we call media as a double sword agent, because it has its positive implications, but at the same time, if we see the other side of the coin, it can have drastic implications. And
negative.
Yes, very negative implications, because in this day and age, the collaborations, the cooperation, it leads the nation forwards, and the conflicts and the chaos between both countries, it is not in the benefit of any bilateral relations or trilateral relations, because in this day and age, cooperation is very important, because we are in the multipolar world order, and that's where we cooperate with each other. But media, these kinds of fake news, as you just mentioned, this should not be should not create a kind of stumble blocks between relations. And how much what can be done, because there could be some journalistic norms. Their government should play a positive role. They should come up with kind of mechanism that every news, every media outlet, whether it's print media or electronic media or social media, they should work in synchronization with the national interest, rather than, because the role of media it's very critical. It's just like walking on the eggshells, because it's very sensitive. Unfortunately, if we see the role of media in Pakistan, our media is much more concerned about their rating race.
And that's the same the world over.
In the world over. And if it is happening, what happens is, out of nothing, we see that there is hoo-ha about something of a petty issue. And same is being reflected, same is being colored, even in this incident. So, until and unless there is a check and balance from the government side, and then the code of conducts, they should not be only on the papers, they must be implemented. And if it is not implemented, then there has to be a proper mechanism for that. Because how nations work, how countries work, media, the role of media is, it's an institution. It should work like an institution, and that should be based upon the national interest. Now, I tell you what, that there are lots of negative, there are lots of obnoxious things happens on all over the world, but they are not coming on the media. I am not of the view that there should not be criticism. There should be criticism as far as positive criticism is concerned. That should be in the benefit of the society, that should be in the benefit of the government, that should be against, wherever there are loopholes, wherever there are inefficiencies. So media should, work upon that. Rather, there has to be a negative portrayal if we see through media, which is at the detriment of the national interest, of it is going to harm, bilateral relations. So, and I tell you what, in this day and age, media, as I just mentioned, can play a very positive as well as can play havoc between relations. So, I mean, there has to be check and balance from both sides. Considering this fact, from both sides, whether it's US or Pakistan, media, whether it's print media or electronic media or social media, if we see through the prism of social media, and if we calculate the relationships through the tweets, I mean, it's ridiculous. We should use proper mechanism. We should, come up with the tangible news, which is based on facts and realities, and so that things should be in the black and white.
So what happens if the facts and realities are not corresponding to your national interest? Then what sort of a value judgment does one need to make, whether if a fact or a reality is contrary to the national interest? Then what do you suggest?
I would suggest that still,
does the media need to be, does it have to uphold the rules of journalism and be truthful, or does it have to be more careful and not report those things? As you were saying earlier, national interest is supreme. Let Shiraz also, give his opinion.
It's a relative thing. National interest is, there is no tangible rational interest. Interesting point is, anything can be a national interest. For me, it can be a glass a minute ago and then this cup of green tea for that matter. So national interest itself is not a concrete concept.
Right.
So
It keeps on changing and
keeps on
evolving.
changing. I would say because it's a state system, a state international system. So in state international system, media needs to be more aware of the fact what directly affects the livelihood of the people of Pakistan. Right? So that is how we can decide what kind of truth, what is truth, how to present that truth. That is going to be very important because I think
Are there different kinds of truth?
because what Trump is trying to convey to its yes, there are. What Trump is
You
trying
mean
to
alt facts?
what Trump
Are they really there?
what Trump is trying to do right now is trying to convey his truth to his own people, which is having a very devastating effect on the relationship for that matter, between
Yeah, but the
Russia.
media in the US is calling the president out every time the president makes a statement
That's
which
why
is
he's-
not factual.
that's
Then the
why
media
he's
is the one
using
that.
the social media. That's the problem.
But the social media is also doing the same thing. I mean, there are like number of clips on Facebook or Twitter where you can see the president was, fact
that is
checked.
Donald
and,
Trump.
Yeah.
That is Donald Trump. But when President of United States of America tweets, there is a difference. What we see, the kind of scandals, the kind of you can say behaviors of Donald Trump, what we see was not the President of United States of America. Now when he tweets, he is the President of United States of America. So there is a difference regarding that. That has more influence. That has more impact. I think that's again, it's a short-sighted ploy in order to you can say rally around the public opinion in United States of America. In that regard, it probably be more helpful. But as far as the international diplomatic relations are concerned, international bilateral or otherwise relations are concerned, I think it has not been having a positive effect on them. So that needs to, it's not a positive, a good exercise on part of the statesmen, I would say, the presidents for that matter. If they have certain concerns, those need to be discussed on the table, not issued on Twitter. So that needs to be seen from that angle, because Twitter is a very open media for that. Everybody can have their own perception based on 2 lines. There is a word limit as well. So you can express a limited opinion over there. So I think that needs not to be the exercise. I hope over the period of time, because this is the first time that Donald Trump has ever been able to enjoy such a prestigious position in the government for that matter. So I think he needs to be more politician than a businessman.
Right. Well, we're still talking about how the media has affected Pakistan and US's relations. I asked this question earlier also about how the media can be manipulated by other inimical forces which are, in the favor of having bad relations between 2 nations. Especially when we talk about it, India is a country which has belligerently tried to demonize Pakistan on every level, and they've succeeded to quite a degree. That's what we are seeing. So again, the question is about the use of media as a tool a tool of diplomacy or a tool of international relations. How dangerous is it, and how can it be made a safe tool?
Well, Waqas, I would say that, when it comes to bilateral relations between countries, they can have their reservations, and they can put aside their reservation for quite some time, because, for example, even if I would quote the example of China and India, they have their certain reservations. So they're keeping those reservations aside, or they want to address them, but at the same time, they have economic relations with each other. So they're reaping the fruits and getting the benefits and potential out of this relationship. As I just mentioned earlier, because in this day and age, you have to collaborate with each other. So, and another thing is, media should be synchronized that what is in the best interest of the country, what is the national interest. I'm not saying that
Well,
media should be banned.
That's a totally different debate, Yasser, because what I may perceive to be in the national interest might be something that you perceive to not be in the.
Of course.
And then that is a whole different can of
Of course,
worms.
but what
are we going to do about that? How will we reconcile this argument when I feel that reporting of a child being raped is important and it should be on the media so that people are aware? Somebody might feel that no, this kind of news should be hushed up. So what's the point? What are we really talking about here?
Yes, that's what I'm saying, that I'm not of the view that such news should be banned. I'm not saying that. But I'm talking about the bilateral relations. We should follow, media should follow that what is in, they have to follow our foreign policy, that what kind of, how we are looking forward, what kind of benefits we can have from the bilateral relations. And there are always positive and negative sides. But as you just mentioned, that news could be manipulated. So why don't we manipulate for the best in the positive way? Also, if it can be contrived, if it can be concocted in the negative, we can come up with negative portrayal, why not in the positive portrayal? So that's what I've been saying, that there are two sides when it comes to electronic media or social media or even print media. So, and I'm saying that both coins should be presented. But at the same time.
But what we're seeing now is a phenomena where incorrect information is being disseminated, and people are, unfortunately, they're innocent when they lap it up and they say, okay, this story appeared in this trusty newspaper.
I would say they
it
have
must be
equal
true.
opportunity. Both have equal
So
opportunity.
they should be
The
given.
propagandists.
They should be given two opposing news and ask themselves to make up their own
I
minds
would
which one
say
is the
they-
truth
they-
and
they-
sift it
they-
for themselves. Is that what you're saying?
That is what the information warfare is all about. You have to make sure that you're ready for that. The kind of, you can say, journalism, especially the WikiLeaks, how it affected the relationship between the countries, and how the countries have to behave accordingly in order to make sure that it does not do further damage to their relationship. So I think that this is going to be, with every passing day, we have to change our tactics. We have to change
Because it's
our
becoming
way
a
of
much more
governance.
open world. Now people have much more access to information. It is called the information age. And obviously, mainstream media, electronic, print, has an impact. But now we see a phenomena where mainstream media is now taking a back seat, and social media is far more
Exactly.
Yes.
important for people.
So
and that's the
where
source
you
for
have
their
to
news.
Increase your presence. That is what is more important. One last point. I have been suggesting this thing and repeating this thing on multiple programs, that we need to have a global news channel. That is very important for Pakistan.
And which is following the principles of truth in journalism.
Which is following the principles of Pakistani national interest, the true national interest. We don't have to be somebody who's trying to have all in, we should be somebody who's trying to have a common interest with all.
What about human interest? Like, something which is good for all of humanity.
Exactly. Common interest is for all humanity, for that matter.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing your views with PTV. We're almost out of time, Yasser. Is there something you want to say?
Just one last example, because
Make it
it's
short.
it's a media warfare. I would give you just last example, that if we talk about CPAC, how much disinformation is being disseminated and spreaded, especially in the social media. We have to fight for that. We have to present what is true. We have to bring up, the kind of stances which reflects to our national interest. So I agree with him that it's a kind of warfare, and this warfare is happening all over the world.
Right.
So if we don't react and we don't present our true picture to the world, so we would be lagging behind. So it's very important that we should bring and we should disseminate what is in the national interest.
India
of
is an
our
example.
country.
Thank you very much for sharing your views with PTV
Thank you.
World.
Thank you.
Well, you heard the conversation, and in conclusion, we always like to say you may please draw your own conclusions from what you've heard. But before we end the program, this is the last program for the week. On the 14th of this month, it will be Mashal Khan's death anniversary. And the question remains that what have we done as a society, and what more do we need to do in order to rectify the intolerance and the bigotry that has seeped into our society? And I think it has been too long, and the family of Mashal is still knocking on the doors of justice, and we hope and we pray that justice is delivered to Mashal Khan and such incidents do not take place in our society anymore. And with that hope and on that note, it's goodbye.